Hi, I'm Tim Zacharias with Cougar USA and your host of Building Value. We're on location today, downtown Houston in Pennzoil Place in this nice spec suite here. I'm joined today by my good friend Tyler Garrett, Senior Vice President of Transwestern. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yep, really excited about today's episode. We're going to be covering COVID's impact on the commercial office space market and Tyler's thoughts on how it's going to be affected moving forward.
On Building Value, we go behind the scenes at some of the most iconic buildings in Texas to showcase the incredible people that design, build, and maintain them and their impact on the community.
Talk a little bit about where you grew up.
So here in Houston, west side of town, went to Stratford High School. Energy corridor, as office broker would say, and then went to A&M right down the road, so pretty close.
Yeah, and then after A&M, how did you get into commercial real estate here in Houston?
I had an idea that's what I wanted to do while I was in college, so I was a finance major, but took quite a few real estate focused business classes, so then just tried to make connections once I made it back to Houston and got into the brokerage business on the tenant rep side.
And so how did you end up at Transwestern and what is it that you're doing now for the company?
So in 2010, I transferred from tenant representation to landlord representation with 811 Main right over here with Hines. So I was an in-house leasing agent for them for 2 years. And then from there, I moved to Skanska, another development firm here, and was involved in in-house leasing with that shop. And then in, early 2016, I was approached by Transwestern. They had a spot they needed to fill. And it was on, a great team within Transwestern, so it was a pretty easy call for me to move from in-house leasing role to a third-party landlord rep broker.
Okay, and I feel like most people probably understand what is it you're doing, but if you can maybe just explain.
Yeah, so basically we represent mostly institutional owners of Class A office space, and it's not geographic specific. It's kind of all over Houston. So there's sub-markets that we work in are downtown, Inner Loop, Galleria, Energy Corridor, the Woodlands, and kind of in between there as well. So we're kind of all over the city representing, I'd call it probably a dozen different owners.
Okay, nice. And this is not the typical background for me for doing one of these podcasts. So nice to get out a little bit, see some new. Actually see the inside of an office building.
Yeah.
Usually hanging out in the basement. So what is this space that we're in now?
So we're at Pennzoil Place. This is the South Tower, which is 711 Louisiana. This is the 11th floor spec suite that we built out. So we took about half of a floor, so it's roughly 10,800 feet, and totally gutted it and redid the space. And it's basically move-in ready. So we've got some private offices on one side, open plan behind us, exposed ceiling behind us, so some kind of new modern effects that kind of really accentuate some of the attributes of this building, like the floor-to-ceiling glass you see.
Yeah, it's a really sweet space.
Yeah.
So, so I guess kind of along those lines, what is it about Transwestern or what y'all are doing that's maybe different from other reps out there?
So, it's first and foremost starts with the people on your team, obviously. So we've got, probably the strongest leasing team in Houston right now, led by my partner, Eric Anderson. And we've got some younger people on our team, Parker Burkett and Katie Gregg, that work with us in all these different assets. And so we've got kind of differing age levels, different relationships, and then, obviously, really good product as well. So we basically see every single deal that comes across any major submarket in Houston. So from that standpoint, we're well educated on the market, and it lets us inform landlords, our clients, what kind of decisions they need to make when reviewing deals.
Nice. And so how many deals have you seen coming across over the last 6 months or so with everything that's been going on with COVID? Has that had an immediate impact on?
It has.
On the market?
There's been, surprisingly not as many deals die because of it. A lot of deals still got done. Maybe they were shorter term or smaller. And then a lot of the deals that were in process when it hit back in February, March still got done. I think, as we progress through this time, it's kind of becoming more apparent, what the risks are for companies and, can they go ahead and make a long-term real estate decision? We're seeing a lot more tenants come to the table now. So I think there's comfort's probably the wrong word, but there's a comfort level within the decision-making process that, I can make a long-term decision right now. But between February and now, it has been pretty slow. A lot of kind of what we would call kick the can type deals where people are just doing Band-Aid extensions, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think people know obviously a lot more now than March, April of what was going on with COVID in general, and being able to kind of make decisions based on that. But we've had, and I think a lot of people have made the decision to send people home, do work from home in that time period, and for us it worked in the interim, but wasn't necessarily something I think that we're going to continue for the long term. How much does that come up in conversation? You're seeing
some tenants, and we're starting to hear this more recently, taking possibly a more of a hub and spoke approach to their office space. So, keeping an office, in an urban core like a downtown here or a Galleria, something like that, and then maybe having a few satellite offices closer to where people live. It really depends on the type of work you do. There's plenty of jobs that working from home just is not conducive to good product and good results. But then, what we're hearing consistently is accounting groups love it right now being home. So I think there are going to be some job functions that are a little more easily done from home. But, you can't discount the company culture and, the teamwork, the, personal relationships you gain. You can't do that over Zoom.
No.
And I heard it last week, but it's a really good phrase for all of this. What work from home allows you to do as a company is play defense. You can't really play offense. You can't go out and really try and pick up new business without being engaged and being in the office.
No, it's a great way to look at it. And, what we noticed something similar, with the culture and things like that, but the kind of the accidental collaboration that happens when you're in the same space, walking past each other in the hallways.
Right.
You can't accidentally bump into somebody on Zoom and recreate that.
Yeah, like in our office, we sit all right next to each other, and while we're in private offices, we hear conversations through the sheetrock next to us that, inform you of something that you might not have otherwise known. And that person next door didn't have to come tell it to you. It's just we're all there in that environment. Right. So our business is very much kind of knowledge by osmosis. And, I think there's certain businesses that are similar to that, and that's only allowed to continue through the office workplace.
Absolutely. And, I think there's also been some studies around the effect, like generally how effective people are working from home. I mean, some, like you said, the accountants and others may get in and dig in and work better from home, but a lot may not.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a few brokers about this. Obviously, we have young kids, and working from home is challenging, especially when the kids were out of school.
Absolutely.
And there were points in time where you literally are speeding to get something done because you're being distracted, or you have to be somewhere with kids, you have to help out, at the house. And there was, periods of time where, you're not comprehending what you should be comprehending in an email, and just trying to get it off your plate. And so that was something that I've heard consistently from other brokers, that it was just a very challenging time, that, late spring when school was out of session for people with young kids.
Yeah, I'm very glad that the kids are back in school, and that I'm back at the office.
Yeah.
So have you noticed like a difference in what tenants are looking for in office space?
So we haven't really noticed much in the way of physical changes to their space. There's definitely companies that maybe plan very densely that are considering, trying to spread people out a little bit and therefore take more space. But the actual programming changes of the actual interior office space hasn't really changed yet. I think it's still kind of early on that side of things. But what we do see is, requests for more flexibility. So whether that be, contraction, termination rights, downtown, one of the big items is parking. So a lot of tenants are asking for what we call up to parking rather than must take parking. So they only need to pay for it if they're using it. So pieces of the deal kind of like that, but it's still pretty early when it comes to physical changes to the office space coming out of this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did the, kind of put the plexiglass up, maybe split up people that were sharing space, but it's going to be interesting to see longer term how that's going to change, the layout of a space like this.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing in downtown skyscrapers you have to deal with is vertical transportation. And so, what is the protocol coming out of this as far as how many people can be in an elevator? A lot of these taller buildings in downtown, people would shove in pretty tightly. And right now, depending on the building you're in, it's either 2 or 4 max per cab. And it also depends on the size of your cabs, obviously. But that's going to be an issue just because the level of service, the vertical transportation service is not designed for that. So if we do get back to full capacity, and then on top of that there's different guidelines, that's going to be more of a nuisance coming to the office.
So I guess the kind of the popular configuration of office space in a lot of ways has been what we have behind us, the open concept like that. Do you have some some actual offices on the other side, but how do you see the actual tenant space changing going forward?
So I would say some of the more kind of progressive build-outs included kind of a work-based strategy component where you might have a private office one day, you might go to open plan the next, so you never had a static workspace. And so these types of spaces had clean desk policies where you pack up everything at the end of each day, maybe put it in a locker. That, I think, is going to be challenged moving forward because I just don't know how many employees are going to be comfortable kind of sharing moving space, around and sharing workspaces that somebody else was at the day before. If you do continue that, it's obviously going to take a pretty robust, I think, cleaning each night coming out of this. But I think for the most part, open plan is probably still going to work as long as it's not too dense. If it's benching and you're 4 feet from somebody, that might not be the best. But if you've got 8x8 cubes that have a decent height around them, I just don't see that changing for the open plan concept. And obviously, I don't think private offices are going away, and I don't think they're going to be that impacted by this.
Right. Yeah, and we've talked a lot on the podcast about ways that you can improve the air quality and other things in the space. So I think the more that we're learning about that, the more buildings have time to react and add that filtration and UV. That's going to be a safe way
and I
to go to work.
I could envision newer products coming out on the UV front that would be pretty impactful for this and make people feel safe about being in buildings.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a few already available that that people can do, and we've made some upgrades at our office, different air filters and things like that. But ultimately, I guess always comes back to the the individual responsibility. Making sure you're not coming in when you shouldn't be.
Right.
Kind of thing,
and one thing we've seen, in talking to clients around the country that are in different markets, Houston obviously needs a pretty robust HVAC system as a base building design compared to other markets, and so some of these markets it's becoming more normal to increase that MERV rating on your air filters, but all these designs in Houston for the base building HVAC are designed, kind of at their peak. And if you start limiting the airflow through a filter, it can have pretty drastic effects in a building in the summer in Houston. So
absolutely,
that's something where I think our city is a little more sensitive to some of those kind of easy measures that might happen elsewhere.
Yeah, and they're limited by the tracks that are in there on the size filter you can get into the air handlers and things like that. So it's definitely a challenge to to make changes to the existing
Yeah.
systems, but there's definitely ways that it can be done and it be a safe working environment in kind of this open concept. So, if the, there's been a lot of major companies out there, a lot of them in the tech industry saying, you can have the option to work from home indefinitely. And I don't really see that being an across the board situation, but maybe a lot of companies will say, okay, maybe you can work from home 1 day a week, 2 days a week. How is that going to change the way you would lay out an office space?
Well, it kind of gets back to that same thing where ideally, as a company, if you know this employee is only going to be here 80% of the time, you're going to use his space the other 20% of the time for somebody else and create a system where you maximize your efficiency. With the shared workspace hesitancies, I guess, that seems a little more difficult to implement. And so I just foresee office populations being a little bit lighter, but still pretty much the same space. Gensler came out with a study where the overall effects of what's gone on are pretty negligible, just because some tenants are going to need to take more space to spread out. Some are probably going to take less because a component of their office can work from home. But I think they said, it's probably in the 2% range as far as the change in space needs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Would have thought it would have been a lot different than that.
No. I mean, you've also got, work from home 3 years from now, let's say, is going to be a lot different than work from home during COVID-19. So you've got some pent-up frustrations regarding the whole work from home thing. So I think you're going to see, initially once things more normalize, you're going to see people kind of come back in droves, and then maybe there's going to be kind of a new normal at that point, after that point.
So with Cougar, we came back to the office pretty recently, actually. We had some employees that never left, in the warehouse and production and things like that. But a lot of our office employees, we tried to keep them away from the office, limit the exposure like everybody else. But over the last, 3 to 4 weeks, we've really rolled everybody back into the office, and it's been nice to have everybody back and kind of get that culture and feel back. When did y'all? I mean, I imagine it's tough for you to do this remotely. So when did you get back into the office, and how was that transition for y'all?
Yeah, so I think it was probably second week of May when I started going back in. Luckily, so we office at a small office in the Galleria away from our corporate office, where we have, call it 5 brokers and a few admins. And so for the most part, the team kind of started coming back mid-May and into June. And it wasn't, mandated by any means, but like you said, it's very difficult to do what we do from home. So I think everybody was, welcoming to get back in the office. So we've been back in earnest since mid-May. Our staff has been, a little bit staged, so we'd have people come in one day, maybe not the next 2, and vice versa. But we've been back since then, and it's been, great because there were so many frustrations dealing with different teams, different calls, different clients, different brokers, and it wasn't conducive at home. So it's been great being back in the office.
Yeah, sure. So when you're kind of looking out to that timeline 2-3 years from now, or even sooner, what are you seeing kind of as a market outlook for Houston for office space?
So it's going to be challenging because prior to COVID, we were in a challenging spot and had been for 5 years. And so really what COVID did was really rip the Band-Aid off for a lot of the oil and gas companies that had capital calls basically coming in 2020. So we've seen a lot of increase in bankruptcies, which prior to that, when the oil prices fell in late 2014, what we saw was a massive sublease space coming to the market. Well, sublease is a tenant's problem, whereas a bankruptcy turns into a landlord's problem if they reject their lease. That's direct vacancy coming back. So we're going to be in a challenging time for the foreseeable future. But Houston needs to attract new industries. Oil and gas is obviously changing. The Wall Street folks and investors aren't willing to put the capital in. They don't see the long-term investment gain there. So I think Houston can attract some new industries. A big component of that right now is life science. That's a big focus. You've got the innovation district down here with Rice that's trying to be an incubator for some of these types of users. You've also got the fact that we're the fourth largest city in the country with very little social unrest compared to for what we've seen in some of the other cities. You've got a very pro-business climate. You've got 100,000 people moving here every year. So there's a lot of good things. You've got low cost of living, relatively speaking to other markets. You've got educated, available workforce. So I think the components are there. We just need to kind of reimagine what drives this city, because I foresee in the future oil and gas is going to be a smaller component of that.
And I think it has been, over the years, it's becoming a smaller and smaller part of the overall economy of Houston.
Yeah.
Healthcare is a massive part. Unfortunately, both of those have taken a hit during COVID, so that's an extra challenge for Houston. But one of the and I forget who it was, but one of the economists was basically saying that Houston is one of the best positioned cities in the world to kind of come out of the situation that we're in.
Yeah, and I remember that presentation. It was a guy out of Denver, but yeah, and that it has to do with the Sun Belt movement. Texas is basically the most well-positioned state of all the states for that, because you've got the border with Mexico, you've got the port of Houston. So there's a lot of ingredients there for a big comeback, but right now it's a struggle, and I think it will be for at least the short term.
So what would your advice be to any building owners that are looking to get their space leased out? What would be some things that they could do in this climate?
Yeah, so I would say, one, like for this space, we have a digital marketing tool where we've shot, pictures all over the space, and you can digitally walk around it on your computer. So a decision maker in another market that might be in charge of the real estate decision doesn't have to fly to Houston to come tour the space. They can do it on their computer. So that's important. And then, understanding your goals as a landlord. Do you really need to fill the space right away, or would you rather hold out for a better deal? So each landlord's different, but for the most part, there's going to be spaces in downtown and Houston that remain vacant for years and years. And so you have to determine, where's your threshold, and, where can you make a deal, because the deals are pretty few and far between. And that's going to be the case, at least in the near term. But, moving into next year, the market's not, there's so much vacancy that the market's not going to react with increasing rates or more landlord favorable terms. It's going to be a while before that happens.
So if this is a tenant's market, like you said, what kind of leverage does that give them, or what maybe would be things they could take advantage of right now, longer term or better rate?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, it's likely a chance to upgrade buildings. If you've got a B tenant or a tenant in a B building, it could be a good opportunity for them to jump to an A building, because they are going to get, historically pretty good pricing right now. And I think you'll see some tenants that are, kind of more the probably bolder tenants jump into a long-term deal here soon, just because the chances that the market goes that much deeper are pretty low. And it's not because of the fundamentals in the market, the supply and demand. It's more, for a while now, tenants have shown, even in downtimes, they're willing to pay more for their real estate to be in higher quality product. And so your subset of supply is somewhat smaller than the overall market, because a lot of that supply is irrelevant in buildings that would be considered purely commodity. So for a tenant to jump in to a longer term deal now in a nicer building, they're going to be getting most pick of the best spaces, while also getting very favorable economics.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought to kind of use this as an opportunity to upgrade, and get that better deal. So I mean, you talk about that A space. I mean, not being necessarily a commodity. How often is that coming available or kind of turning over? I mean, are they typically in longer term leases already?
Yeah, so there's a lot of it available right now. A lot of it's been caused by bankruptcy. So a lot of those energy companies were in nice space. So it's out there. And it's not like it's hard to find, but I think, as you move on, as tenants get more comfortable and you see more making that decision to go long-term, lock into nice space, that supply starts to shrink a little bit. So I think, it's obviously a good time to be a tenant, but, they're going to need to make decisions that are pretty forward-thinking in order to get themselves comfortable with doing something long-term. I mean, if you're a tenant and you're worried about, well, how much space do I need? Well, landlords, like long-term deals, and so if you can commit to a longer term, you're more likely to get that flexibility that you need to kind of help ease your concerns on that front.
Yeah, and I think there was initially a lot of talk about, well, and I think New York had this, where there's just this exodus from the city that they're not going to be people doing this, not going to be renewing leases, are not going to be, but that doesn't seem to be the case for Houston. I mean, I know it might be a struggle for the next few years, like you said, but I think the kind of commercial office space, commercial real estate industry is not going anywhere anytime soon in Houston. Yeah,
and it's a different market there in most cities where it's so served by mass transit. That adds another component that makes it very difficult, whereas in Houston, most people are driving to work. So we're kind of better positioned from that front, even though it sounds ridiculous to say, after COVID than most other cities that had implemented mass transit, decades ago.
Yeah, that wouldn't have thought that would have ultimately been potentially a benefit, I guess. But I mean, there's still a little bit of mass transit here, but not.
Yeah, so
not near.
And really, it's downtown. I mean, downtown. I think it's 45% of the employees take mass transit, meaning the bus. So now we have a few rail lines as well, obviously, but downtown has historically been the only submarket that has been served by mass transit.
Interesting. And so is there going to be any impact, do you think, on kind of the tunnels or the ancillary kind of economy that's associated with downtown, with everything that's been going on?
I mean, I think the tunnels it's going to be a challenge because I think there's going to be reluctance to travel downtown in the tunnel system because there are areas of the tunnel that can get pretty confined, and if you have a lot of traffic there, that's a lot of people you haven't been around that are passing you, sharing the same space. So that's going to be a challenge. I think you'll see street level retail probably perform well. You'll see probably a lot more outdoor patios come from street level retail. So that'll be good for downtown because as somebody that doesn't live in Houston, when they come to downtown, they're pretty floored by the fact that there's not many people walking around in the streets. There's not much retail. So I think that would help our downtown immensely if we could get more retail up onto the street level. And then you have a lot more residents downtown now than you did a decade ago. So those residents need retail locations to go do business, to go out. And so from that side of things, they can't go into the tunnel after 5 p.m.
Right.
So, and most people are still at work at 5. So by the time they get home here, there's not much open. So having that street level retail presence, I think, will be great.
I would have loved that when I lived downtown.
Yeah.
I lived at the Rice, 2007 at the Rice Lofts, and literally, like you said, 5 o'clock, everything was closed.
You had Flying Saucer, and that's probably about it.
Yeah, Frank's Pizza.
Yeah,
we ate a lot of Frank's Pizza. I mean, you had to leave downtown to go get groceries. I mean, it's not the case now, but like you said, there's some new things added, and hopefully, like you said, it does. We do see some growth in the street level retail, and it's happened up and down Main a little bit over there, but definitely a weird feeling to walk around downtown in the evenings back then and not see anything.
Yeah.
Well, Tyler, really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Really enjoyed the conversation, and it's nice to be able to get a longtime friend on the show. Tyler and I go way back now, almost 20 years, so always great to have a good friend on the show.
Well, thank you, and glad we were able to finally get it done. It's been an interesting year, so very interesting topics, obviously, but thanks for coming downtown, and
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, appreciate you hosting us in this great space. After seeing this, really want to upgrade Cougar space. Don't know if we can quite afford to move downtown, but hey, I'd love to be here. So also want to thank you all for watching today and hope to see you on the next episode of Building Value.